Hello YouTubers, and welcome back to Go Figure Customs YouTube channel. It's time once again for another 2-minute tips and tricks tutorial. You don't know how many times it took me to say that correctly. I'm doing a build for my female iron anvil paratrooper, and normally I use just a straight Marauder Task Force Valkyrie buck. However, there's a lot of sculpting on the original figure that I really like and want to translate over into my custom. So I want to use some of those parts that were on the original figure. Let me grab the original figure real quick. Here's the original figure. I want to use the forearms, but I don't want to use his hands because they're too big. I want to use the lower legs, but I don't want to use his boots because they're too big as well. So how do we get those off and swap those out? I've mentioned it on other videos, and you've probably seen it around. The best way to swap stuff out is with a hairdryer. So what I did was I heated up her forearms, pulled hers off, heated up his forearms, pulled his off, heated up the forearms once again once they'd cooled, and pulled his hands off, and did the same thing on hers. You want to be really careful pulling hands off, and you want to make sure they're really hot and nice and soft, because those have very nice joints in them that you may want to use on other customs. So you want to make sure the forearm and the hand is very hot and soft when you pull the hands out, so you don't damage the joints. Using hairdryer versus hot water, I use the hairdryer because it's quicker, because it heats more thoroughly, and I don't get paint fades. When I was customizing Iron Man 2 figures, I was using a big old coffee cup full of water, put my figure in it for 3 minutes in the microwave at full power, and it works. Don't get me wrong, you can heat stuff up and soften it up with water, but I got a lot of paint fades from that. A lot of the paint came off in the water, and I actually recommended that to somebody, and they did that to their figure, and they got a paint fade, and they were pissed at me for recommending that. So hairdryer honestly is the way to go because it's quicker and safer for your figures, and it heats more thoroughly, which makes it easier to separate stuff. All right, so as you can see, I've already swapped out the lower leg, but I haven't swapped out her boot yet. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to heat up her lower leg, and I'm going to heat up the original figure's lower leg. You can see the original one's still on here. I'm going to heat up her lower leg, pull the boots off. I'm going to swap the boots with just heat and pulling it out. Now, you can see that this is nice and tight, but it wasn't like that when I swapped it out. I'm going to pause the video right here and swap this leg out. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do it first. I'm going to heat it up. There's a pin in there. I'm going to push that pin out with some tweezers, and then I've separated the lower legs of the original one. Those have a screw in it, so I just unscrewed it and pulled the whole lower leg off. I am leaving the upper knee joint because that's the joint I want to replace, because I want that knee pad. If I wanted just the lower legs, I would probably heat up the pins on the lower legs and swap those out there. But I want that upper part of the knee because I want that knee pad. So I'm going to heat this up, pop that pin out there, and then I'm going to reinsert the pin with the lower leg. However, there's a problem with that, and I'm going to show you just as soon as I get this leg. Okay, I've got that lower leg swapped out. The main reason I didn't tape myself swapping that out is I really need like a GoPro to wear to have a POV to see what I'm doing. The other reason is I'm not very good at this yet, and although it'd be kind of interesting to watch me fumble around with this just to see how difficult it can be. I pop that leg out. To get that pin back in, you got to get all the holes lined up, and it's kind of hard with that tiny pin and getting all 3 of those holes lined up. And then Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I don't know where it went, the one I was using. And then I squeeze it together with a pair of hemostats, or might be called needle drivers. Look on eBay, you can get them really cheap. I pulled these out of an old field surgery kit I had years and years and years ago from an Army surplus store. I had one, got a second one when I was in Afghanistan. I actually used it to do suturing. So I don't use that one, but you can get hemostats. They're hemostats or needle drivers off of eBay. These are a very useful customizing tool. They're really good for holding things when you're priming them or airbrushing them. And they're also really good at squeezing that pin back in. Now, I mentioned a problem, right? You can see the problem there is that lower leg is a different size. The knee joint is smaller than what the original was. So now I have a very loose joint. But you'll notice this one is not loose. It's because I've already done the tip and trick here. All right, this is going to sound very counterintuitive at first. And it's going, if you haven't heard of this technique, you're gonna say, what are you doing? Don't do that, you're gonna ruin it. And there is potential for that. So there is a tip and trick to the tip and trick. The tip and trick is, I'm gonna put super glue in that joint. I know, super glue in the joint. Oh, it's gonna lock up. So the tip and trick to the tip and trick, keep that joint moving until the super glue is dry. If you do that, it will form a layer of dried super glue on there, and it will make that joint thicker. Now, if you're gonna attempt this, I recommend getting an old beater figure, maybe spend a couple bucks on eBay, get an old vintage G.I. Joe figure where the seller says the joints are loose, and practice on a beater, an old trashed figure. I can't stress that enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to drop some super glue on the front, on the side, and I think I just super glued my finger to the bottle. Nope, guess not. All right, still pretty loose, so I'm not too worried about it yet. And this one's really kind of tricky because there is a big enough gap that just the super glue alone really doesn't do it. So I am going to hit it with some super glue accelerator, which went, oh my God, my desk is a mess. Ooh, see, you can hear, did you hear it pop? Because I let it set for a second. There it is. All right, I'm gonna hit it. Ooh, real quick. And then get right back on. Ah, there we go. There we go. I'm gonna keep this moving for a couple minutes. You can see where there's some film on the back of that. I would show you, but I need to keep this joint moving. So some of that super glue built up on the back of the lower leg and created a little film. Okay, it's still pretty loose. So I'm gonna have to do it again. But it's a little bit better. I'm gonna let the super glue accelerator kind of evaporate off of there first, but keep the joint moving until you are 100% positive that the super glue is dry. Otherwise you will glue a joint in place. I have done that accidentally, gluing accessories to vests and not realizing I'd gotten some super glue in shoulder joints, or gluing torsos closed is another one where I've accidentally got glue in shoulder joints and glued an arm in place. So anytime you glue something close to a joint, make sure that it's not, see, I didn't really do a good job there, which is kind of shitty for the video, but really needs to get in that joint there. There we go. You can see that. Maybe slow your movement down just a little bit to get that glue a chance to form in there. And then when it's the right, I don't know the word I want to use there. When it's as tight as you want it, then keep moving it frequently. All right. That's how I want it. I'm going to hit it with that super glue accelerator one more time. And that will take the rest of that out. We'll dry up the rest of it anyway. Right, and you know, the 2-minute thing is just kind of a catchy title, since this is definitely gonna be more than 2 minutes, but there's a lot of information and I didn't want to do like 4 videos. So there you go. I have swapped out the lower leg, put a little bit of super glue in those joints, and my joints are tight as I want them to be now. And you can see this one I did before the video and it still moves. This one we did for the video and it works just fine. A lot of customizers know this tip and trick. A lot of customizers have used it, but if you're new to the game, this might be something new. And this has the tip and trick in the tip and trick, so you don't ruin your figure. I got another tip and trick for you here. One last one. This is going to be a good video for doing builds. Okay, so the reason I couldn't find the part that I wanted is because I put it back where I was supposed to put it so I wouldn't lose it in the first place. Here's another tip and trick. Get a little tray like this, a little divided tray, and put, when you have one custom project that you're working on, put everything in a plastic tray. Take it in there and put it out of there when you're done working on it, or in between. So like this one here, I'm working on a female viper. You can see her joints are kind of loose, so I need to do that super glue thing to her. I just haven't gotten around to it. So all of the vests that I'm still trying to decide how I want to build their vests too. So all of that is in here. This tray is specifically for my iron anvil. So this needs to go back in here. This needs to go back in here. This needs to go back in here. This needs to go back in there. So the reason I couldn't find the parts is because they were back in the tray where they were supposed to be. So that's a good 2-minute, good tip and trick for you. So I took the hands off of the forearms, the ones that came with the original iron anvil, because they were pretty big. They were definitely man hands. I want to use the hands that came off of the Marauder Task Force Valkyrie figure, which are a lot daintier and therefore going to be more in scale. However, when I stick them in that hole, oh, look at that. The pegs are too small. They flop around in there. So I got a fix for that too. Another old tip and trick. And I'm going to put those back so I don't lose them. Once again, we're going to go to our old friends Super Glue and Super Glue Accelerator. And I'm going to drop some super glue. Again, it's going to sound counterintuitive unless you already know this trick. Then if you already know this trick, you've been using it for a long time and you're going to go, yeah, I already knew that. I'm going to fill those holes with super glue. And I'm going to hit it with the Super Glue Accelerator. And I'm going to glue those holes completely full of super glue. And I'm going to let that set a few minutes. While I'm letting that set, I'm going to show you the next thing that you need. If you have not invested in a Dremel, you really should. I don't know how I customize without a Dremel. I am fairly certain I have used a Dremel on every custom I have ever made since I have had it. Even just like repaints, there's something that I've Dremeled on it. I almost guarantee you. So what I am using here, I'm going to show you a bigger version of it I think it's called a burr. I am not actually the best guy to tell you what the names of tools are, unfortunately, unless they're medical tools. So it looks like a ball, but I think it's a burr, and I think I've seen it called like a jeweler's engraver too, I think is the other thing that I've heard it called. So I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to use this one. It is really, really small, and you're not going to be able to get a good, I can't like get it to focus on it. It's going to focus on me, but it's really, 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 really tiny. So once that super glue has set and is dried, I'm going to Dremel small holes in there and then fit the hands back in. Okay, now, caveat to that, or tip and trick there, you really want to wait till the super glue is dry. It will appear dry on the surface, but it takes a while for it to dry all the way through. If you start dremeling in and it's dry on the surface but not dry in the middle, you will get super glue all over your Dremel bit and potentially ruin your Dremel bit. I've done that before. So I'm going to let this sit for like half an hour. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to go pause the video. I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish this off and show you the tip and trick. I really want to make sure this super glue is dry because I really don't want to ruin my bit. So while I'm waiting for the super glue in the arms to dry, I heated up the lower legs of the iron anvil figure and very thoroughly, because they have joints in them as well, and popped the boots off, and then heated up the lower legs of the Marauder Task Force Valkyrie and popped her boots off as well. Also very thoroughly because don't want to ruin the joints in there. And then was able to pop them onto the lower legs of the Iron Anvil, or my build figure. As you can see, I have the same problem that I have with the wrists. The pegs are too small for the legs. So, but see, they fit in there pretty good though. But still, it's not enough. It's not quite enough. So what I'm gonna do again is we're gonna put some super glue in those peg holes, and we're gonna hit it with the super glue accelerator, and we're gonna let that set. However, I'd say we've probably let this super glue accelerator set long enough on the wrists, so we're gonna Dremel those out just on the lowest speed. I'm just gonna go in and Dremel out a little bit at a time and test fit it. Tip and trick here, make sure you put the left hand on the left arm. Done that before in the test. Yeah, I don't think see, it didn't, I got super glue on the top, but it didn't go all the way through, all the way down into the hole. So that is definitely an issue too. I don't think it's just sitting on that hole. So it's kind of tricky to get that filled. This other one might be fine though. Okay, so the glue on the right hand did get all the way down and did dry in there nicely. Now I've Dremeled the glue out. I had to heat that plastic up just a bit to soften it to get the peg back in there. I did not over Dremel the wrist. It's not so much a problem if you do, because you'll just put more super glue in there, hit it with the super glue accelerator, and try again. So that's the nice thing about this particular trick, is if you screw it up the first time, man, you can keep doing it again and again and again until you get it right. this is not one of those you got to get right on the first try or it's done. It's not a one and done thing. Man, this is what's nice about this, is you can keep doing this until you get it right. If you're a customizer of a Real American Hero figures, vintage G.I. Joe figures, and you want to add wrist articulation, this is a really cool way to do it. You just Dremel off that wrist, the hand off of a vintage G.I. Joe figure, Dremel in a hole, and you can pop in an articulated hand from another figure. And then you can articulate, you can add articulated hands to your vintage customs. I used to do that when I used to do that when I was still doing Real American Hero customs. There we go. Now it occurs to me that you could do the same thing that you did on the lower leg with the hands by just dropping super glue in there, putting the hand in there, and then just manipulating the hand until the super glue's dry. I'd be really careful about doing that, because remember, these hands have joints in the wrist and you're probably going to get glue in there. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying if you're going to do that, be very careful. I do think it would work, but you might run that risk of gluing that joint, the wrist articulation joint, in place. That super glue in the legs should be dry right now. Instead of making this video longer than necessary and have you watching me Dremel out 2 holes in the legs, I'm going to pause it and we're going to take a look at it after I get them done. Okay, as an experiment, I over Dremeled the glue that I put in to the boots, and then put the boots back in the wider holes, and then dropped some glue in around the boots, and then just maneuvered the feet until I got the right tension, just to see if that would work and to see if it's better than filling it with glue and then Dremeling it out. Honestly, I could go either way because it worked. So do slow movements to get it to where that tension, where you want that tension to get that tension to build up. Because you kind of want the glue to dry a little bit. Once you start feeling that tension, then start moving it a lot faster. And if you're going to do the hands or the boots, remember that there is that extra articulation in there. So be sure and not only to swivel it, but to hinge it as well, because you will get glue in that joint. I got glue in both of those joints, but since I kept those joints moving, they did not glue up. And then once I got the right tension where I wanted it, I hit it with super glue accelerator to stop that drying process, and it finished it. All right, so I have swapped out the forearms from the Iron Anvil and put them on the Marauder figure. I've put her hands back in those wrists. I've swapped out the lower legs that did not fit onto the Marauder upper legs, and I've put her boots into the G.I. Joe legs that did not fit. The only parts on this that fit really well and perfectly did not require further modification were the forearms to the upper arms. Everything else required a little bit of glue to manipulate, to get it to where I wanted. So that is how you get limbs to fit your figure, to swap limbs on your customs that do and do not fit perfectly. This has been a little bit longer than a 2-minute tutorial, but I think if you don't already know these tips and tricks, it will help you make better builds. So, as always, please do that fun social media stuff. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below. And thank you for watching.